Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Big Chill Podcast Euro Group Preview. We are on to Group D. For those of us, if this is your first one listening, make sure you go back and listen to A, B, and C first. Otherwise, Eddie will get super pissed off that you're not going in order. This one is probably one of the ones that was battled for out of the three of us because this is England's group. So before we get started, Sam, whoever's listening, make sure you go in, subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, go to our Instagram, our Twitter, anywhere you can find the Big Chill Podcast, start subscribing because there is stuff being released and you're missing out right now and you don't want to miss out on that content. So
I like that that was vaguely threatening. That's the tone that we want from our content.
It's the threatening FOMO. You don't want that FOMO.
The fear of it.
But without further ado, Sam, give us your breakdown of Group D.
Yeah, so here we are in Group D. This is where England and Scotland are from a home nation's perspective. So brings back the old memories of kind of Euro 96, seeing England playing at Wembley. We've now got England playing at Wembley again. And, pending the way that they get through this group, if they do, they'd have a very favourable run at that stadium as well. So England are in a group with Scotland, the Czech Republic, and Croatia. Croatia's always an awkward one for England, right? We've had a bit of a rivalry with them. Last couple that we think of in competitive football is the semi-final defeat in the last World Cup in Russia. But going further back, the Croatians beat England at Wembley, I think when we were 2-0 up as well. Scott Carson's pretty famous miserable night, which meant England failed to qualify for a Euros because of a defeat by Croatia. So they're renewing their rivalry and they're the two best teams in this group and they go up against each other in the first game. I think, though, there's a big difference now between, that game 2 years ago and now. I think Croatia has gone through, I wouldn't say huge changes, but they've lost some of their bigger names, definitely through retirement and getting to that World Cup final. Whereas you see England now, I mentioned with the Group A that Turkey have the youngest team by average. England have the second youngest at 25.2. And England have, quite rare for England, I think, is they have such a fantastic versatility and depth to their squad. There's legitimately some extremely good players that would have been capable in this squad that aren't there because of the depth we've got in those kind of forward positions and midfield positions. So I think this is a really exciting England team. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it pans out. The interesting thing for England is that all the games are at Wembley. And interestingly enough, if England win this group and they get to the final, the route to the final is 6 out of 7 of those games is at Wembley as well. So there's a real incentive for England to not only do well, of course, it's basically a home for them if they can get to the final, but to win the group as well. And they start out against Croatia. So they need to win that group to get that run at Wembley. So I think England are going to top this group. I don't think it's the hardest group. I just think it's slightly more awkward than the other one, though, in terms of the Czechs and the Croatians and also just the Scots in terms of a rivalry. But when you look at Croatia, you look at the team that was at that 2018 final. It was Mandzukic, Rakitic, Subasic, Modric, Kovacic, Perisic. They had a really good, strong team. You now look at it, half of those have gone with retirement. So like Mandzukic, Rakitic, Subasic, but Modric, Perisic and Kovacic are still there. So they're still a strong team. I just don't think they're as strong. And I think that will show in a better England team beating them. So I think England will get the better of Croatia for first. And I think Croatia will get second because I think that they're quite simply put better than the Czech Republic and Scotland. The interesting thing about the Czechs, though, is that they're a pretty weak team, I think, in terms of Czech players and squads of the past. Like they got to the final in Euro 96, and I kind of remember that time of the Czech Republic team. But interestingly enough, the Czechs have beaten England in qualifying for this Euros, and they beat Scotland in the Nations League as well. So they've got a recent history of, beating the teams in their group at the moment. But I just can't see it happening. I don't really see the depth there. I don't see the kind of quality to kind of hurt England. I guess kind of looking at it more protective from that way. But the interesting thing for the Czechs is, we've mentioned it in the other previews, is that they might be able to kind of sneak in, because they play the Scots the first game. If they get the win there, then they play the Croatians. And you could potentially see that as that kind of second or third, whoever wins that group or game. So it's kind of interesting that they may have the potential to sneak in if they do beat the Scots. But I kind of see it going England, Croatia, Czech Republic, Scotland. The interesting thing about the Scots is it's the first tournament for them in 20 odd years, 23 maybe, since the days of 98.
Since 1998.
Yeah, 98 in France, where they opened up against Brazil, I think, actually.
They did, yeah.
Eddie, why didn't you? I was hoping he was going to give us like the days of and then something from 1998.
Well, I can tell you a lot about
What do you remember about 1998?
The World Cup?
It was the days of what?
The Chicago Bulls won their last NBA championship. Michael Jordan.
Dario G, Carnival da Paris is one of the best songs for a football tournament.
Scotland had
Nintendo 64.
Scotland had my favorite ever, and this is going to be upset England fans who love 3 lines on a shirt, but I think Don't Come Home Too Soon by Delamitri is the greatest ever tournament-related song. I think the honesty and just the admission of the fact that the expectations were so low, it just makes it a wonderful song. A team that had, also for me as a Blackburn Rovers supporter, had a number of Blackburn players in that team: Colin Hendry, Kevin Gallagher.
The only one I can think of with Delamitri is Roll to Me. That's the only song I can think of. But
They had a few big hits in the 90s.
So
very 90s band. If you want to think 98, Delamitris. I mean, it's actually a little too late for them, but
there's a I love the fact, though, in a way, that England have got Scotland in a competitive game at Wembley, though. I think it's going to be a fantastic kind of setting. But the interesting thing about the Scots is, right, they do have Premier League players.
Sam, do you love it even more because of Phil Foden's haircut and the fact that
Gaza.
if he scores, he's undoubtedly doing the Gascoigne dentist chair celebration?
If he scores that goal like Gascoigne as well, like an equivalent of that kind of run,
that might be going too far.
that would be pretty amazing to watch. Yeah, that's a pretty special moment. Kind of, especially with the kind of David Seaman penalty save as well against McAllister, I think it was. Yeah, some real kind of early memories for me. Definitely like one of the first tournaments I remember, like really, really profoundly in terms of like the games and how England played, etc. With the Scots, though, they've got Premier League talent. You know, McTominay plays for them. He's at Man U. Tierney is at Arsenal. Andy Robertson is at Liverpool. You know, they're all frequent starters. They're all very good players. But it would take something special, I think, to get out of this group. I guess the thing is that because maybe the Czechs are somewhat of a weaker side as well, that maybe there's an opportunity for the Scots with third place. But I think that England and Croatia are quite nailed on for
Scotland,
the top 2.
I think Scotland supporters are going to find themselves in an awkward position of having to support England in matches, because it's unrealistic for Scotland to expect that. I think Scotland have to support England against Croatia.
Oh, they'll want England to get the 9. They'll want England to have 9 points.
They want them to have 9 points, so they're even going to want England to beat them.
Oh, of course not. Sorry. Yeah. Ideally, they'll want them to have 6 points. Yeah, that's true.
Just beat us. Get it over with. That's fine.
I think you're being overly optimistic, though, there in the common sense approach that Scotland, and I don't mean this particular to Scottish fans, but that I bet you could poll a number of Scotland fans who would say, we'll happily finish 4th if it means England finish 3rd.
As a worst place 3rd, so they go out, because they could still go through as a best place 3rd, right? That would suck.
Sure, but I still think they would probably take it as a blot on the England copybook.
Oh yeah, they'd love the idea of like, if we're going down, we'll take the English down with us kind of logic.
But no.
So that to me brings the question in: can you see a path that England don't qualify?
No. I think people love to do this thing, this storyline, which came out in the World Cup, that everyone always consistently underestimates Croatia, this team that consistently produces good to world-class players, and that people sort of overlook them whenever they're playing. I don't think that's true. I don't think it was true of England in the World Cup. I don't think it's true of England now, but I think they will look at Croatia and think, man for man, they are a much better side, and that if you have any aspirations of being a challenger for a tournament like this, that you should be able to comfortably beat Croatia. And they have comfortably beaten Croatia since the World Cup
maybe
itself,
twice.
Right?
I think maybe twice, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think, and this is what sometimes annoys me when people talk about England fans being overly confident. I think there's nothing wrong with saying, is it inconceivable that England lose to Croatia? Of course not. Are Croatia a good team? Yes. But England should absolutely expect to beat Croatia and to beat them fairly comfortably. I'll be very, very disappointed if England draw with Croatia and then the sort of post-match spin is, well, it's a good result, get a point on the board. Croatia are, World Cup finalists in the last tournament. They're experienced. They've got lots of players playing at big clubs. And I can very much see that story being spun. I'll be very disappointed, both in the match result and with people not giving a fair analysis of the fact that this England team should beat every team in this group easily.
Yeah, if they want to win it, sure. This shouldn't be a tough group in that respect. Like Croatia, in a way like Belgium, right? For their size, they have this good pedigree of good talent that always seems to come through, and they do have good generations of players for the size of the country they are. But no, absolutely not. Like England are second favourites to win this tournament. You can't be saying that Croatia at Wembley in your opening game is a really difficult. You can't spin it, in my opinion. It's a bad result if they don't win it, as far as I'm concerned.
And if England come out on top, who do they play then in the first?
Well, let's just tease this. If you want to find out the answer to that question, you should go and listen to our podcast and check one of our future videos where we predict the round by round outcomes of this tournament. And on that note,
not a setup.
It wasn't, but it worked. And on that note, why don't we wrap up the group preview?